Stella Mukitima, there is the husband and the kids. They are all here. I will ask them just to wave so that the church may see them. Okay, those are our guests as well. We thank the Lord for their presence. Without wasting any time, I will hand over to her.
Happy Sabbath. Happy day.
Happy Sabbath.
Okay, we can project the first slide. So this afternoon, without wasting time, we talking about mental health. So I was given this topic, a very broad topic. There was no specification in terms of the focus because mental health is broad, right? So meaning that I could have thought of anything to talk about, but whether that would be relevant to you or not, that's a question, right? So for that reason, for relevance, I thought, as broad as it is, let me start with the basics. And we just look at mental health overall, right? I'll give you the outline of what we're going to be talking about. So we're not necessarily going to focus on a specific mental health disorder right now. But the main aim, let's go to the next slide. We are basically just going to focus on what mental health is, so we gain an understanding of what we mean when we talk about mental health. When you talk about mental illness, what do we mean? This is just, I think, the basic knowledge that will equip us to be able to detect these problems when we see them, and so that we know what to do and where to go. So we'll also be looking at the risk factors broadly for mental health. What are those things that put everyone at risk of developing mental health issues or mental illness, right? And we're not going to go into details into mental health disorders, but we'll just give an overview of what we would expect to get at different stages. All right. So that's just going to be our overview. Let me start by saying, some people, when you talk about mental health, especially as Christians, very funny enough, there's an association kind of with faith, right? And which is something you don't get with other medical conditions. If you've got diabetes, or you've got hypertension, faith does not come up as an issue. But when you talk about mental health related problems, the faith issue comes. Do you agree with me? Yes. I do want us to understand, I'm not going to read the verses in details, but I do want to, and everyone to understand that we are here today, as sinful as we are, going through all these challenges, health problems, health issues. We wouldn't be here today if Adam and Eve had adhered to God's command, right? We all know that things went wrong immediately after they sinned. So everything we are going through is as a result of sin, including what?
Mental health.
Including mental health problems. Some of the things, as we will see when we go through the risk factors, we'll understand that, yes, we have to take accountability of some of the things we go through. We could have prevented them, right? But it's not always the case that somebody has to be blamed for what you are going through. And it's got nothing to do with our faith, right? So I just do, for those who may actually be still believing that, you don't have faith enough if you're depressed, don't have faith enough if you're going through this, and that. It's got nothing to do with faith. It is because our bodies deteriorated through sin immediately after Adam and Eve disobeyed. So it's very important, because when we think like that, we tend to start stigmatizing people and judging people. When people have got certain illnesses, we start to judge them. And we feel superior and holier than thou. That's not how God looks at us. Mental health is similar to diabetes and hypertension. The same empathy and support that you afford a person who has got diabetes, who is on a wheelchair, a person who's affected by mental health issues, afford the same empathy and support, right? So that's just my breaking point. Let's move on to the next. Okay, we are on that slide. So what do we mean when we talk about mental health? Mental health is defined basically as a state of well-being in which you and me, right, we are able to realize our own abilities. Maybe if I could go around and ask everyone, what are your abilities? What's your potential? What are your talents? Some know, some still don't know, right? But even those who don't know, they have some abilities. But how much do you realize those abilities? Are you aware? Are you insightful of what your abilities are? Right. The ability to cope with the normal stresses of life. So being mentally well, it does not mean that you are living in the absence of challenges, day-to-day challenges. You are not living in the absence of stressors. The wind will blow from left to right. The stressors will hit, from all angles. But how much are you navigating life through those stressors? Are you still able to get up and function and still be productive despite the existence of all those stressors? So how much are you able to actually cope? The key word there is the coping. We all use different coping mechanisms. Some are constructive, some are destructive. Some coping mechanisms, they perpetuate our mental health problems. You think you're coping and you're creating a problem on top of the other, right? So, yeah, we'll talk about that also later. A person who can work productively. If you are in school, you are able to concentrate, adhere to limits and boundaries. You are productive in your academics, right? You are getting good grades, you are focusing, you are just progressing scholastically. If you are an employee, how much are you productive at work? And generally, in your whole life as a person, are you progressing? Or are you finding yourself in a stagnant position? Everyone at least has to make some movement. God has designed us to move forward and not be stagnant in one place. How much are you productive in your own sphere? And lastly, the ability to make a contribution to your own community. We all have a mission that God has set for us, right? Are we realizing that mission? What impact are we making on others and in the community, in our families, with friends, with our colleagues? What impact is each one of us making, right? Is it a positive or a negative impact? I'm also noting that it's afternoon, people are full up. Did you get up and stretch your legs? Did you? Please don't fall asleep on me. All right, otherwise we'll have to open. Is there ventilation here? I'm also kind of feeling hot where if we're able to open at least the 2 doors, I think we'll get some air. I'm not really feeling much air as I'm standing here. So maybe we can open those 2 doors and then we'll be more awake. Thank you, my brother. Let's move to the next slide. When we talk about, so we've defined mental health, right? Therefore, mental illness should be the opposite of mental health, right? So it's the direct opposite of mental health, which also include certain mental health disorders, right? Thank you so much. We can open this side as well. So let's look at what mental, move to the next slide, what mental illness, thank you, entails, right? So for a person who's mentally ill, you know, when you talk about that there's a difference between being mentally unwell and mentally ill. You've adopted mental illness, right? A specific diagnosis, mental health diagnosis, when you have a mental illness. You have also adopted a treatable or mental health condition, right? So what we would expect is the changes emotionally, right? We'll talk about them further. We would expect to see emotional changes, happy, sad, excited, depressed, and all those variations in your emotions. Cognitive changes, your thinking process. Are you logical? Are you illogical? Are you rational? Are you irrational? Are there delusions or not? Are you with us? Are you making sense or not? What's your thinking process and what your content of your thoughts is? So, for a person who's got mental illness, there is definitely an impairment in the thinking patterns. And then that gets manifested in our behavior, behavioral changes, which then will depend on that particular disorder. I'm sure we may have seen people, we are all seated here, we are expected to sit, and then it would be odd to suddenly see my sister now running up and down and like too much excited when it doesn't call for, right? So we know those kind of behaviors that are kind of out of the norm and it's not expected and relevant and congruent with that particular situation and context. So that's how you start to say, something is just not right here. Okay. And all these changes will be manifested in your personal functioning. Okay. Personally, you start being dysfunctional in your social circles, your social interaction with other people. You can see that things are not going well. Academic functioning, as I have said, as well as occupational. So what is expected of you and average and acceptable behavior, it is not there. And productivity, as we have mentioned earlier, then it is not there. You will see the dysfunction in these areas, right? Are we still together?
Yes.
Next one. Now, what are the things that are putting us at risk of developing mental health problems or mental illness? The next one. So, in a nutshell, those are biopsychosocial, spiritual factors, right? So we can see we are surrounded with everything. It's not just one sphere, right? There are biological components, psychological components, social components, right? And each one of us, it may come from any of those angles, right? At individual level, at family level, within the community, and also within the structures that we live in. But we're going to expound on this. Now let us look at these risk factors developmentally. We're just going to take a developmental approach to look at these factors. Next slide. Next one. Okay. So we're going to take a developmental approach to look at these risk factors. And I do want us to listen now carefully when we get to these, because these are the things we are in different developmental stages as we are here. And within our families also, we are in different developmental stages. So it means that you may see this, and some of these risk factors are actually overlapping in age. So even though you may see that I've written for this age, it may be that, for this age, it may be that, some of them, and most of them, they are actually overlapping. You can see them across the developmental ages. So we basically going to look at the age of development, and then we look at the risk factors and what we are likely to see manifesting in terms of mental illness. Now stay on that slide, you're fine. Let's look at the age now. I'm sure we may have heard, some of us, the first 1,000 days, Department of Health and everywhere now we talk about the first 1,000 days. So first 1,000 days of life are very, very crucial in a person's development. Anything that goes wrong there can impact your whole life. Right. So even our departments, they are focusing very well on the first 1,000 days to make sure that things are going. So the first 1,000 days is the period from conception to 2 years old. From that day you conceive as a woman until the child is 2 years old, right? So what are the things that can put your life and the child's, jeopardize your mental well-being and the child's mental well-being during that age? Unplanned pregnancies, right? And this is something that happens even to some of us who are even married. Don't ever assume that everybody who's married, they wanted that child. For some, it's still a trauma. I'm not even talking about the first child. Even the last born can still be something else and come and just shake the whole thing, right? So it is very important to understand that pregnancy, was it planned, was it not planned? And if it wasn't, what did you do about it? How did you navigate and process this pregnancy even before the child? Because if you haven't processed, it's definitely going to impact on how a parent will interact with the child and the relationship with the child, which may develop into complex mental health problems. So mothers, please be careful. Don't just wake up and you find yourself pregnant without planning it. Right? Was it accepted or not accepted? These are the questions. I'm basically taking you through the questions that we even ask when you are presenting, especially with children, because we know that this will mean something in terms of your mental well-being and the child. Some people stay with children that they've never accepted. You wanted a boy child and you end up with a girl child and you've never accepted that child. That's definitely going to influence your relationship with that child, which may result in mental health problems. I'm mentioning this because we, as our people, we tend to take these things lightly, like, the child is there, then you don't work, you think these things are going to work themselves out, but you need to consciously make a decision to move forward with what you have been presented with. Successful or failed abortions. When we talk about abortions, we don't not necessarily talking about the strict abortion or the intentional abortion. I mean, we're talking about there's medical abortion, for an example, due to other complications that may have occurred during pregnancy, and you go through that. It is termed abortion. That does have, it may result in loss it's a loss basically of a baby that you have planned. And for some, it may trigger something that may be difficult to resolve. Genetic exposure. This is something that many of us deny. We come from families that we don't know. We know that there's an aunt or an uncle who's known for that behavior that we don't even know what it means. We never named it or labeled it. It may go on from generation to the next. Russ. Malnutrition. There's a great link between malnutrition and mental illness, which also resulted, is a result of poverty. Physical trauma, which may be any accidents that may have happened while you were pregnant. Did you suffer physical abuse, or you fell, or any kind of accident that may have influenced or impacted on the developing brain of the child while the child is in the womb, and then it disturbs the functioning. Smoking, substance use, that is well known, I'm sure by now. If you're using substances, you know where you're going to end up, right? You're not going to be the same as you were before. Social isolation, people who are living in environments where you are definitely isolated. No one is designed to be isolated, right? So those things may also complicate. Hypoxia, when a child has not received, the brain is not well perfused. You know, most when you give birth, the first thing that we expect is for the child to do what?
Cry.
And that's an indication of a problem. So take note, if you can't remember whether your child cried or not during that period, and you start seeing things now later, which may have been as a result of that. Take note, and if you went into cesarean section and you didn't know, ask the doctors, did my baby cry or not? Because the perfusion of the brain is very important. Physical trauma, we've already mentioned it, which may result in brain injury. And especially when kids are young, you don't really detect, unless it's so severe. Every child looks normal, right? Until they have to walk, until they get to stage milestones and you start noticing, but still other people don't see. So the only thing you can see while you say you're not seeing anything odd, try to prevent those things that can put the child's life at risk. After birth, family dynamics and conflicts. Many of us still don't understand and realize the mental health impact of the conflicts in the families. We don't care if these things happen in front of the children. Like, children can't hear, children can't see, what do they know? Right? Then we start seeing these odd behaviors in schools, right? Because now the child cannot confront the child, but we talk about it as we go along. But family conflicts and all these things that are not acceptable and not supposed to happen within our families, they definitely have an impact on the mental health of the children. They can't tell you, they can't express themselves, they can't reprimand you because you are an adult, but it definitely does something within themselves. Interpersonal violence, abuse and neglect, poverty and malnutrition, and maternal death, right? What are the mental health, next slide, disorders that we are likely then to see during this developmental stage? Neurodevelopmental disorders are the most common, which will include cerebral palsy. We're talking about attention deficit disorder, autism spectrum disorder, and all other neurodevelopmental disorders. Global developmental delay, that's when you start to see now the child is not going through the expected milestones, there is some delays. So there's a thing in some of our cultures that we tend to say, okay, no, the child is still young, is still growing, don't worry. This child is 2 years old, still can't speak, and you're not worried. No, there's an uncle there who spoke at the age of 10. So eventually this child is going to speak, right? There was something wrong with that uncle. The uncle was not labeled or was never diagnosed. It doesn't mean that it was acceptable. Maybe if the uncle received intervention, things would have been better. So do get worried when you see the delays in the child's milestone. Act immediately. Do not wait for another year and another year and another year. Maternal depression and maternal anxiety, right? For the mothers. Attachment disorders. We've spoken about pregnancies that are planned or not planned, acceptable or not acceptable, and the abuse and everything that may influence their attachment. You see children and their parents who are not able to have the positive attachment and a strong bond as a parent to a child, right? Disinhibited social engagement disorders and reactive attachment disorders. Those children, it doesn't matter how much you show them love, they will still reject you. They don't know how to receive positive interactions and love. And it just it spills out in other relationships as well as they grow up. So we are likely to end up with things like this. So what must we do then at this age to prevent these risk factors and when we see the problems? I've mentioned some of the things I've already mentioned here. It's very important to observe the milestones when your child is growing up. Observe the milestones. Take your child to the clinic for regular visits, right? And the health professionals will tell you if they detect something wrong with your child. Do pay attention. Don't overlook and say, they are making a big fuss out of nothing. That nurse is funny or what. They know what they are talking about. All right. A full assessment for a child is very important. Anything you don't understand, please take your child to a health professional. Good nutrition is very important, as well as healthcare, support and stimulation. It's very important to feed your child well. When children are growing up, this thing of like, my child doesn't have this preference and that preference, they don't like broccoli, they don't like butternut. You train the taste buds. Train the taste buds to that which is nutritious and healthy for the child, which will help to develop the brain. All children want junk food. So which parent are you going to be? All those things that will influence their behavior. Some parents don't understand the importance of just playing with the child. We have a tendency of just handing over the child to the nannies, if you've got a nanny. Or the TV will be the playmate for the child, or the tablet will be the playmate, such that you're not even able to detect when the milestones are delaying. You never spend quality time with the child to play and stimulate the development. Playing with the child is very important. There are even therapies that are teaching a parent and the child to play sessions. Just to play, spend 20 minutes playing with the toys. That is so important in developing the child's play and in molding the child's mental well-being. Abstaining from alcohol, definitely we all know that, especially when you are pregnant. Don't go near alcohol and smoking. I'll assume that we're Christians here. I should just assume that this one doesn't speak to us, hopefully. All right, please abstain from alcohol. We've got children who grow up with fetal alcohol syndrome, right? You're messing up the child's brain before that child's life is really, you've messed up with it. Don't play with alcohol. It doesn't matter if it's a sip, stay away. Regular exercises during and after pregnancy are very important. Pregnancy does not mean that you are ill. You're not ill at all. Be active, right? Remain active. It's good for your mental well-being. Exercise is very good to balance your hormones. Social support and avoid stress. For some, I know it's difficult to avoid stress, right? Yes, but you can bounce it and say, this one, not for me. Yeah. No, I shouldn't affect her. Let it stay there. Not right now. Not going to mess up with my mind. Make those conscious decisions and try to avoid things that are going to necessarily put you under stress. Antenatal and postnatal visits are very important in medical reviews, because in those scans, the doctors will be able to detect if there's something wrong with the child to prepare you. The scans are able to show now what's wrong with your child, the features and everything, and blood tests, so that you are prepared if you are likely to have, your child is likely to have any abnormalities. You don't get a shock after birth. You have prepared yourself. So do go for those. Don't stay by faith during pregnancy with your eyes closed. Do go and see what's coming up your way. Prevent physical trauma and any kind of trauma, pre and post birth. Accidents, please, accidents, let not our children be found in accidents while there is a mother and a father. These things of falling out of bed, these things of burning, from the heater, from the water are really not funny, because some of them are just pure carelessness and lack of supervision from the parent. How do you put a heater and a pot of hot water there, and there's a child who's running around, right? If you are sleeping with your child in bed, in which position? Are you next to the wall and your child is there? Then what do you expect? So some things, be conscious about deliberately preventing it. You say it's not going to happen. I remember when my kids were growing up, I'm just gonna take a second with this. When my kids were growing up, whoever would look after my child, one thing, because I knew I'm working 12 hours, right? One thing I would say, you are here for this child. Not for the washing, not for cooking, not even for cleaning. This is your toy. Therefore, it means that when I come back, I'm not expecting any excuse to say, she ate soap, she fell out of bed, where were you? I'm expecting you to follow my child like a hawk, right next to you. Don't wink. Sometimes you overwhelm. Those who are able to have nannies will overwhelm your nanny. We say, you're gonna do washing, you're gonna look after the child. Then the nanny is going to say, I was hanging washing and I left the child, and accidents happen that will cost your child's life. Have a nanny to clean the house, have a maid to clean the house and do everything. But for your child, don't compromise. It must be an ICU. 1-to-1. I'm here, always, it's the two of us. Then you will not. It is possible. Those accidents, you can prevent them, because they will cost your child's life. Go for genetic counseling and scans. We've mentioned that. There is Mom Connect now. Those who would like to register, there's Google Mom Connect. You're gonna get the numbers. And then if you're pregnant, you can even register for Mom Connect to get support. Get all the intervention that you can get. If you've got any unresolved mental issues yourself, any unresolved issues with this child while this child is still inside of you, get psychological help. to resolve those issues so that they don't spill over. By the time the child is born, you must have resolved your issues, because they're going to influence the development of the child. Let's go to the next one so that we don't take time. Let's look at during early years now, over 2 years to early adolescence. These are the early childhood years. What are we like? What are the things that would put this child now at risk? Medical illness and medical conditions, some very rare medical conditions. One of them, I've just listed one here, which is pandas, infections that also affect the brain of the child. We see again here the family conflicts. I said they are overlapping there. So we can see here the family conflicts that still continue. The child is born now, is growing up. Those things, family dynamics have not changed while the child is growing. Now you are starting to mold the child's thinking patterns and behaviors. Because now the child is no longer inside. The child is out, can see, can hear, can feel. Are you with me? Everything now that happens with the child, around the child, is definitely going to have an impact on this developing child. Violence and abuse, neglect, sexual abuse, maladaptive parenting. Our parenting styles, they produce, some of us, we produce children with oppositional defiance disorders. You know those children who are very unruled? It's my way or highway. They know no limits or boundaries. They adhere to nothing. They grow up, they develop conduct disorders. They end up in jail, very truant at school. They leave school, and some of them, the parenting went wrong, right? So watch your parenting. Do consult with Ellen G. White with parenting. Tough love. I can just sum it up and say parenting is about tough love. So if you're going to be sweet love, be careful, right? So your parenting style, it's going to produce something at the end of the day. Poverty and malnutrition were also mentioned. Again, we are likely to see now these children developing neurodevelopmental disorders, as I mentioned earlier, disruptive mood, dysregulation disorders, intellectual disability, which may be as a result of everything we've mentioned, learning disorders. Okay, some of us sitting here, when the teacher says, no, your child, I cannot promote your child to the next grade. You say, why? Not my child. You force the teacher to promote your child to the next grade and the next grade. Your child reaches grade 7, they still can't read and write. And you're still blaming the teacher, yet the child has got a significant learning disorder. Are you with me? Right. Behavioral problems. I've mentioned oppositional defiance disorder and conduct disorders. Attachment disorders, I've mentioned them. Maternal depression and anxiety. So again, we are seeing what we have seen earlier. What can you do at this stage? You can take most of what we've done earlier and add this. Prevent exposure to toxic family dynamics and abuse. We can talk the whole day to say, how do you do this? Right? Try for your children not to be exposed to things that they are not supposed to be exposed to, because they internalize them and they find their own ways to resolve them without telling you. And when they internalize them, it comes out in their behavior, right? Which we then as adults tend not to understand and misunderstand and say this child is unruled, only to find out this child is communicating what is happening in their minds and what they're experiencing in that language, which you will interpret as this child is not listening to me, is oppositional. Are we still together, church?
Yes.
Nutrition, we've spoken about it, and avoiding stress. Let's move to the next one. I also don't want to take much time so that we can ask questions. Let's look at the early adolescents now to, the adolescents, yes. What are the risk factors at this stage? They start to go on periods, their bodies start to change, and they start to see things that they didn't see before. They are actually developing hormonal changes, right? Everything I've mentioned just now. Family dynamics, again, we see them there. If your family structure and your family experiences are still maladaptive, they are going to influence the growing adolescents. Violence and abuse, same thing. I'm going to just pass the ones we've mentioned earlier. Maladaptive parenting, again. Other parents, they struggle to navigate the parenting when children get to that stage. They start to be demanding. They've got certain preferences. Now, as a parent, you've got to think twice, what do I allow my child to do or not? How much boundaries do I put in place to say no to this and yes to that? At the same time, I want my child to be exposed to certain things. There are parents who still believe that, let the child go to the clubs, let the child taste this. In some cultures, it's even accepted. So, you are 16 years old now, you can taste alcohol. What do you do in your parenting during this difficult stage? Right? Maladaptive parenting, poverty, malnutrition, substance use, alcohol. They start to experiment. Now it's no longer about you, right? As a parent, it's also about them now and the choices that they also make, which actually need your guidance, right? They start experimenting with substances and alcohol. Identity issues start to emerge, right? And this has become the most common now. I know even if I could ask in this room, is there any parent who can identify with this? It's things that we have noted and overlooked while the child was growing up, right? And now at an adolescent, the child is starting to emerge and say, this is who I am. What does this mean? Right? Identity issues, they play a lot. And how you navigate through these identity issues will also influence their mental well-being. Peer pressure. Peer pressure. We've seen a lot of children committing suicide because of the peer pressure, which for some, bullying is also experienced. Risk-taking behaviors. They start to taste alcohol, smoking. And our children are found in this, ne? Yeah, we've got our Adventist children who taste these things. It's a tough stage. Trauma and loss. For some of us who think that children are not affected by loss and trauma, if somebody dies in the family, it's only the adults that are comforted, right? Everybody who comes. I don't know how many of you do attend to the children when you go to these funerals. How many of you look out for children in that house? Or you're still just saying, the children are there, and you go and you comfort the adults. Those children, they are also affected, and if they are unattended to, they may have mental health issues. Behavioral problems, which is mental health disorders, I've mentioned them. ODD, oppositional defiance disorder and conduct disorder, I've mentioned it, depressive disorders, learning difficulties, anxiety and psychosis, right? I mean, when you get to psychosis, in our inpatient unit, we do have adolescents where substance abuse is the most common problem in our communities. Our society is battling with substance abuse, which make our youngsters have psychosis, end up with schizophrenia. So substance abuse is a serious problem. We need to look out for it in our children. What can we do then? Involve your child in constructive social activities and programs. Keep your child busy. So this requires you to have a structure for your child. Regulate your child's day and weekends, literally. If you want to call that controlling, fine. But you rather control everything. There's time for TV, there's time to go for swimming, there's time to go and to the soccer field, there's time for until bedtime. So being controlling does not necessarily mean that your child won't be able to do. You engage your child in extramural activities and in everything, but it is regulated. Amen. Right? And it is supervised. Know where your child is. Don't say, my eye is an adolescent, I can't ask. If you leave the house, where are you going? Who are you with? What are you doing? Because at the end of the day, it's going to come back to you. Make sure that you occupy your child's time constructively. Full physical assessment and psychiatric assessment and interventions, especially when you start detecting that there is something that's not going right. Don't wait. We've said that. Do not wait. Seek help immediately. Rather, have your child assessed and they detect that there's something or not, than to sit back and let it develop itself, because it may be too late. Attend empowerment sessions for parents. I mean, I don't think we can ever graduate in this school of parenting, right? There's always something to learn. Children are different, right? So there's always something new that you can actually learn. So do empower yourself. Let's move to not the last one. For 15 to 24, late adolescents, that's the next one. Late adolescents. What are the things that are putting at this stage now more of these youngsters at risk? Exposure to adversity, including trauma and loss. I'm just going to go through this and then we can ask questions. Peer pressure, we've mentioned it earlier. Exploration of identity and gender norms, right? Media influence. I don't know how many of our children are on TikTok and Facebook and how much do we monitor their engagement on social media networks, because there are a lot of things that just come whether you've asked for it or you didn't ask for it. So you're not there to see what came up. How much are you actually regulating, especially when they're younger? Family dynamics, interpersonal relationships, forced marriages for some. Now we've got what? Marriage at first sight. Yeah. Unplanned pregnancies, I've mentioned. Violence, maladaptive parenting. We've mentioned it. Stigma, discrimination and exclusion. I'm mentioning quite a range here because I know that some of these may be speaking and resonating with some of us. Lack of access to quality support and services, chronic illnesses. Some of us are orphans and they are struggling to resolve the losses that they've had. and that influences their mental well-being as well as substance use. Some of the mental health issues that we would expect to see is a full range of mental health disorders. I mean, you can name the whole list, you can find pretty much anything here. Depression, post-traumatic stress disorders, anxiety, psychotic disorders, behavioral disorders, and just everything. I'm sure you can see the list, right? So this is basically everything that you can actually see. And what you can basically do, definitely you need to get urgent medical and psychiatric intervention. If someone at this stage doesn't want to get assessed or treated, you can't send them against their will. The police will assist you to admit a person who's mentally disturbed and a danger to others and to himself for help, right? You also need to engage in constructive social and personal activities, set programs. So basically living a good lifestyle will go a long way for our youngsters. Let's get to adulthood. That is the next slide. Adulthood. All right. What would put us now as adults at risk? Again, hormonal changes, right? I mean, at a certain age now you start your body changes again. When you're entering adolescent, you went through hormonal changes. And now which one would you go through again?
Menopause.
Yeah, so we go through a lot of things. So life really, it's you can see most, it's ups and downs, right? So it means that you have to have your eyes open at every stage. Substance use and alcohol, again, death and losses that we go through, crime, violence that's happening around us, that traumatize us, and we end up with PTSD, as we mentioned earlier. The poor environments and socio-economic environments that we live in, they do affect us mentally. Most of us, we end up with depression. The living conditions are so depressing, and you're like feeling hopeless. This is just my life. And some can even take their lives because of that. Poverty is not a nice thing. Unresolved childhood trauma. At your old age now, everything that you took lightly and you thought you had resolved, it comes back to your face. Things that happened in your childhood. At 30-something, you need now to go back and confront your parents, consult with a therapist to resolve things with your parents, because if you don't, they start manifesting in your life and affect you. So these things do come up. And again, a full range of mental health disorders we are likely to see here. I'm not going to mention of them, but I've just grouped them into depressive disorders, anxiety disorders, psychotic disorders, personality disorders. I get personality disorders. I don't know how familiar we are. I mean, we've talked about those. We've talked about malparenting, right? And the children that we are likely to produce. What kind of, imagine that child growing up spoiled or unruled or everything. Now, I'm surprised when we end up with somebody who's antisocial as an adult. You can't do anything now. He thinks he's got a right to violate everybody's rights.
Yeah. We know.
Yes. It's my way or no way. I'm used to, as I'm growing up, things happen the way I want. Now you grow up, you're an adult who thinks that the world revolves around you. All those different personality disorders. Some of them could have been molded into something better. Are we together?
Yes.
And you actually deal with them.
Yeah.
There's so many. Okay, what do we do? What do we do, Bandla? Medical intervention and assessments, just like we've done before. Abstaining from substances, this is a serious business. Don't go near substances, young people who are here. Do not go near alcohol. And don't go there. It's difficult to come back for many. Empower yourself for income options, guys. I do want to emphasize this. Don't sit in a position where you end up being mentally affected because of your poor or impoverished state. Try to be innovative. Try everything you can to fight against it. Don't let yourself go into a depressive state and actually helpless position. Seek help from others and do everything to empower yourself. Get every option that you can to get yourself, at least to uplift yourself. Consult the health professionals, of course, for help. Let's go to the elderly people now, the next slide. I think this is the last group. The elderly people. I don't know if we've got elderly people here, but maybe if we die, if we don't, I know some of us, we've got elderly people within our families. Let's go to the next slide. We've got elderly people, yes, in our families. What are the risk factors for elderly people? Ongoing losses, right? And a lot different losses. I mean, you've lost people. You are now deteriorating and losing capacity to do so many things. You were independent. Now you are going into a state of being dependent again. That's not a nice position. And some elderly people, without support, they don't navigate elderly stage very well. And it does affect them mentally. A decline in functional ability, it does affect them. Reduced mobility, right? All of a sudden, it's like now you are crippled. You have to ask for help to go here and there. Chronic pain, frailty, health problems that they go through, dependency and the need for long-term care. It does depress our elderly people. Bereavement, especially if you lived a long age and then you start seeing now everyone is going in front of you, you even wish to go yourself. When is my turn coming? Right, so our elderly people are not are not having it easy. A decline in socioeconomic status, especially if you were not well resourced. If you didn't have enough to carry you through your retirement. Now you're experiencing poverty in your retirement. It's not a nice position, right? Let alone the abuse that our elderly people experience from us, right? And from the youngsters. Social isolation and loneliness. I don't know how many of us have, when last you actually visited your grandma or your grandpa. And some of us, when you go back home, that granny is sitting there alone in the specific room when everybody is in the lounge. I remember my grandmother's last stages were like that. She moved now from the lounge and to the room. So when we need to access her, we know everybody must go to the room. But there comes moments when everybody is just in the lounge and she's alone there. It's not a nice position. We've lost friends and everything. They end up with dementia, some anxiety disorders, and self-harm. What we can do is basically to get them social support, medical support, as well as psychological support. So some people, they tend to neglect elderly people at this stage. They say, what else can we do for them? Still do take them to health professionals for intervention. As long as the person is still alive, we cannot give up, right? So we can't say, she's waiting for the last days. Do take them for health care to help them through this stage. Let's just talk about coping. I think this is the second last slide. Coping is the key thing we've talked about that will also determine your mental well-being, right? We said we're not expecting an absence of stresses. We're also not expecting an absence of everything that we have mentioned here, including the risk factors, right, that we have mentioned here. Some of these things we can do something about, but some of these things, they are just thrown at us. Genetic factors are just thrown at us. There's no way you can run away from some of these risk factors. But when they've hit you, what do you do with them? So coping in general is very important for everybody. If you do not develop positive coping skills, you are putting yourself at risk of developing mental health problems. Life is about coping. Life is not about having it easy. I hear some people, I don't have problems. Maybe you can put up your hand if you don't have problems. If your life is going well, your slate is clean, you can put up your hand. But many of us here are coping with something. Am I right? Yes. You are getting through the day because you are fighting with this something. So life, until Jesus comes, will continue to be a coping. Right? We have to cope. So this is adjusting to. When we talk about coping, we said adjust. Don't expect to remove the problem. Do what? Adjust. There are times you will not be able to do anything about that problem. It will be a thorn on your flesh till you die. Adjust. Right? If you want to be okay here, adjust. Or tolerating stress while trying to keep a positive self-image and emotional equilibrium. Awufuni kuwa, right? Awufuni ikuqubule ikuwise phansi, you start losing your mind. Therefore, you need to adjust and navigate. Try everything to be like, here we are. As I'm standing here, I don't think you can detect whatever problems I may be going through. Are they written on me? No. You would think I don't have, right? I'm clean. That's life. To stand like this, maintain your self-image and your emotional stability. Adjust. Right? Fight with everything you have to adjust. The stress will come. Tolerate. Cope with it. Don't let it knock you down. Coping occurs in the context of life changes that are perceived to be stressful. Right? That is why you may, when you hear, what is she going through? I wouldn't cope with it. Someone is perceiving that stress that you are going through as overwhelming, and you are standing. Right? In the context of these life changes, We've listed a lot of risk factors there. And I'm sure all of us who are sitting here are found in one or two of those risk factors. But the thing is, you need to navigate life through those stressors, right? Coping is a process rather than a once-off. So there is no time you can ever say, I'm tired of coping now. I hear some of the people, they just, when you get to that stage, it's gonna knock you down. So when you cope with the stressor today, prepare yourself for the one that's coming tomorrow. Right? Oh, inkubule kanjena namhlanje. Okay, maybe this strategy is not working. Let me try another one. And then the stressor comes in another version. Right? You find, don't use the same version, go with it. Siyavana bandla. It's not a once-off. Zukudinwa. The devil doesn't get tired of bringing these risk factors. You know, when Jesus went to pray, we've read the lessons of last week. Whenever he came back, he finds his disciples doing what? He says, why are you sleeping? The devil is not sleeping to bring all that to you. He is devising a new strategy to knock you down tomorrow when you are just tired. You are expecting, until Jesus comes, it's going to come in different versions. The life that we will have, that will be stress-free, it's only the one who will be granted to us on his second coming. So don't say I coped yesterday. That's life. It means you are alive. It means that you are alert. Once you say I'm always coping, it means you are alert of the devil's tricks and these things. Deal with it. Right? Be ready. Consult with God to give you strategies. Seek help to get strategies to cope. So it's not a once-off, it's a process. If you didn't cope with it well today, tomorrow, when you consult with a health professional, you pray about it, you may gain insight into a better way of coping with it. Don't give up. Amen. Right? We did say empower yourself. It also empowers you to cope. If we have spoken about parenting and all those things, once you empower yourself with good parenting strategies, you are preparing yourself to cope through these developmental stages when your children are growing up. And how are you going to navigate that? When you are abused, how are you going to navigate that? Right? So empower yourself is different. So get the resources to cope. The resources to cope from God, from reading, Umoya was prophet, consult with health professionals and the people who can support you, who have gone through that, because you are forever going to cope. Even our young children are coping with us parents. And yes, they can't tell us. They are coping with you. And you believe them? Has your child ever looked at you like, whoa? They can't do anything about you. They have to cope with this parent. If they had a way, they would show you, mommy, this is not how you should be doing it. But there's nothing they can do. Shame our poor children have to cope with us. Let us sort ourselves out, right? Let's sort ourselves out. Then when they are older, like my daughter, 13, 18 and 23, they'll start telling you in your face. Now, they no longer coping. They have to say change it. Shame the poor one is coping with you. Don't instill mental health problems on that child. Right? Yes. Coping is the use of coping strategies interchangeably. Interchangeably. You can't use the same coping strategy for different problems. If I go to Musi, I need this coping strategy that is fitted for Musi. If I go to her, it's a different version, right? I need a different coping strategy. Each problem requires its own coping strategy. Because they're different. So don't think when you use our apply Windows on, you're gonna get it wrong. It's a cool. Right? So empower yourself to learn about these coping strategies. Let us go through some of them. There are a lot. Of course, it will take us the whole week seminar. But let's just browse through a summary of some of them. It is important to lower your expectations. You will forever get depressed by being disappointed for your unmet expectations in life that may have not even been realistic. You have got this idealistic view of life. And when things don't happen that way, hell break loose. You find destructive coping strategies. Manage your expectations of others as well, of everything around you, of your life. Know where you are at, right? Don't be so hard on yourself. Move with stages and understand this is where I am now. And when am I moving forward? Instead of comparing yourself with others such that you end up being so distressed, right? Manage your expectations. Ask for help, we've said that. Take responsibility. Take responsibility for things that happen. There are always two fingers. Other finger will point at the external factors, but the other one is pointing at you. There's a certain percentage of your contribution to the problems, right? There's something that you could have done differently, right? So when you end up in that situation, it's good to also ask, what could have I done differently? Had I handled the situation differently, could the outcome be different? When you take responsibility, you are able to see the possible outcome and you can change it. Take responsibility. Problem solving is very important. This is very important and it's something that we need to teach our children as they are growing up, right? In these minor conflicts and everything, it is not, you saw the Bible even says, it is not okay to go to sleep without resolving problems. You let the day and another day pass and you think that problems will dissolve. Our children grow up with these unresolved problems and they complicate into these mental health issues that we're talking about. When a conflict has occurred or a misunderstanding or something has occurred, it's not going to resolve itself. It still needs you. You were part of it when it started, right? Finish it by resolving it. So help your child not to grow up with mental health issues because of things you left unresolved. And we as parents always know those things, but we use our power to say, I'm an adult, I don't have to say sorry, or I can just, the child will forget, right? Help your child to be mentally well as they are growing up. by unpacking those things that you know may possibly influence them. Talk to them, answer those questions, unpack, allow them to actually ask questions. Aim that by the time they get to adulthood, the slate at least is almost clean. There are no issues, because most of us are dealing with issues that our parents did not resolve. And they will influence your mental well-being. Do problem solving, please. Maintaining emotionally supportive relationships. I do say shy away from destructive relationships. If relationships are not helping you to grow constructively, what's the point? Right? Associate with those who are helping you to be okay, not those who are really not doing anything positive for you. Maintain emotional exposure. Express distressing emotions. Right? The thing is, if you don't express them, they're going to come out in some ways. So even for people who say, I don't want to talk about it, I'm not going to talk about it. Your non-verbal language has spoken. You're going to act out. That's what children do. Children who don't express themselves, they don't have a language to tell you as a parent, they just act out. You hear the child is violent at school, bullying other children, right? Is truant at school. All that behavior, it's got nothing to do with the child. It's as a result of something underlying. They are communicating something. At least by the time you get to adulthood, try not to act out. Use the voice. Express yourself. We expect a child to act out. Ukumbile, utheni, uyazijika, oppositional word. An adult like that, please don't. Right? Find constructive ways of expressing yourself. Right? We all are expected to have emotions, and emotions are part of us. We get angry, we get irritated, we get annoyed, we feel happy, we feel sad, we express those emotions in a healthy way. Even negative emotions can be expressed in a positive way, in a constructive way, without acting out. If I've annoyed you, tell me I've annoyed you so that I can know what I need to do to stop that. Don't act out and you expect me to read between the lines. So let us learn ways to express our emotions. When they bottle up, they become even dangerous for us. If you're sitting with all those negative emotions, they're gonna wake you up mentally. Challenge previously held beliefs that are no longer adaptive. Right? Some of us have certain beliefs that this is how things should be. This is how things are done. Only to find out the situations are different and they've moved, right? So, challenge your beliefs. We have got what we call cognitive behavioral therapy. Cognitive behavioral therapy, it challenges your belief system. Right? Because what you believe in influences your emotions, right? How you feel. And how you feel is going to be seen in your actions, right? So if you are holding unrealistic beliefs about certain things, they're going to influence how you feel, and you will act in a certain way in different situations. It is very important. Maybe I could even take more time to actually explain this. Directly attempt to change the source of stress. For those things that we can do something about, don't constantly and consistently expose yourself to the same stress. You have a responsibility to yourself to protect yourself. Remove yourself from a stressful situation. At least there are situations that we can mention, so many of them, that you can deliberately say, I'm not going to be part of that.
Yeah.
Don't walk in the heat to prove a point. You may not have the capacity to deal with that stress. Right? No, even the Bible says, Subuya wibone esilingweni. Uyosiprove into yobana ndinamandla kangakanani namna. Run as fast as you can from a situation obona uba izandiqoba engqondweni. Izandithuthela ingqondo. Baleka.
Yes, man.
Right? The last one. Distance yourself, which is similar to what I've said, from the source of stress. That was the last one. The source of stress is anything, right? It can be you being my source of stress. And if you don't want to see that, I'll run away from you. Right?
Yeah.
Especially if I've communicated with you and you have no intention of stopping my stress. Don't put yourself in jeopardy to develop mental health problems. We've gone through the whole list of risk factors. There is something we can do about some of them, right? We can consult for some of them to get help and to prevent them from happening. When a problem has occurred, something has happened, at least we know. Now let's go to the very last slide now. Now, where do we get help now if we are found in this? Let's say you've detected some of these risk factors, you've detected that there is a problem here, it's a family member, or it may be yourself, or it may be someone that you know who is found to have some of these problems that we have listed. What can you do? In mental health, of course, there are different platforms from which mental health services are provided, right? I'm going to start with private mental health services. There are many, you can Google, many private service providers. Private mental health nurse specialist, psychologist, registered counselors, psychiatrists, social workers. They are there. If you can afford, you consult any of them. All right, and as well as allied professions like the OTs and some trained professionals. That's the private sector. In the public sector, that is the government sector now, we get mental health services from different platforms. There's what we call community-based service platform, CBS platform. Those are the non-profit organizations that maybe we know about some of them. There are non-profit organizations like SAPI, Batman, there are so many of them, right? Some are for women, some are for men, and some are just mixed, right? At this platform, they also have healthcare workers who do home-based screening. And they do screen for mental health problems in children and in adolescents as well as in adults. They do home-based care in terms of home visits to follow up and trace and recall our people who have got mental health problems. So let's say your people or your relatives or yourself you have got mental health problems and you are receiving services from the public clinic, right? And you are not attending regularly as you should. So the mental health professionals in the clinics will contact the healthcare workers in the NPO's CBS platform and say, here's the address, go and check Nombulelo there, because Nombulelo has stopped attending for treatment. So they will come to your home and check what is it that is causing Nombulelo not to be able to attend. And link Nombulelo to the clinic so that they ensure that the patient can attend again. If there are complex issues, we will discuss with the healthcare worker, and the healthcare worker can link you with the social workers, right? To make sure that whatever problems that the patient has that are hindering the patient from attending at the clinic can be resolved. So I'm mentioning this also so that if we have any of our problems, of our people that we know of, maybe in your community, there's a person who is not attending for treatment, you can first thing go to the NPO, right, nearest to you, and report and request a healthcare worker to do a visit in that house. And they will trace that patient where the patient should be attending so that the person can get help, because we've got many of our people that are roaming around without receiving help. The primary healthcare platform, which is the clinics, now I'm going to mention the clinics. I'm sure we know of many of our clinics, city clinics, the government clinics, Department of Health clinics as well, that have got mental health professionals, psychiatrists, psychologists, mental health nurses, right? They've got outpatient services. So in the clinic, you don't have to have an appointment. You go and request an appointment. If you have a problem with somebody that you know of who may need help, go to the mental health section in the clinic, or to any nurse that you see in the clinic, and ask around about the mental health services that they may have. Definitely you will get help. Now, when a person has had serious mental health problems and needs urgent admission, right? Sometimes it happens that you're at home, something happens, somebody just becomes psychotic, becomes a danger to themselves and to others, you don't know what to do. First thing, you call the police. They will assist in taking the person to the district hospital. We've got a 72-hour emergency unit where people who require, who are acutely ill, are admitted and assessed, right, to check exactly what is the problem. From the district hospital, what they do, they will assess, do a psychiatric assessment to determine what the problem is. It may be that, say, after 72 hours or after a short period of time, the person is okay. If the person is okay, that person will be discharged home, right? Either discharged home to continue with the treatment in the clinic. In other cases, the problem may be complex, the illness may be severe that the person needs to receive intervention for long term. Now, such cases are escalated to the psychiatric hospital now. We know some of our psychiatric hospitals here in Cape Town. We can mention Stekland, Falkenberg, Lendegeer, you know. They provide long-term, right? So if a person requires long-term intervention, then they will be escalated. That is the tertiary level. Also at tertiary level, I need to mention this. There are therapeutic services, right? I do want us to understand that when we talk about mental illness, we are not referring to psychosis only. Psychosis is just one symptom of mental illness, right? Some of us sitting here are living with mental illness. Do we know that? Some of us are suffering from depression. We are on tablets. Sure. We are on tablets. Some of us are suffering from anxiety, right? So in tertiary hospitals, psychiatric hospitals, there are therapeutic services that are offered, and those are on voluntary basis. If you're not feeling okay, you feel like you can't cope, or you're overwhelmed, you can present yourself, right? And you'll be admitted for a period of time, learn coping skills, and receive therapy, and then you are fine. School health services and social development. The types of therapy, of course, is the ones I've listed here. You can receive therapy at individual level, or maybe your family, or even occupational therapy. We've got 10 minutes, and I think we can use this 10 minutes for questions. Any questions? Okay, so do we have a mic? Now, my brother right at the back. Or was this the first hand? Okay. There's another hand right at the back.
Okay, thank you. The first question I want to ask is how long can one stay on mental illness treatment? How long can, if you understand what I'm saying, I don't know. And then secondly, can God heal those with mental illness? Can He heal those with mental illness and say that I'm no longer taking tablets, or I'm fine now without any tablets? That's the question.
I'll start with the last one. God can intervene in any situation.
Amen.
But let us not be naive, right? And think that God says we mustn't use health professionals and medical interventions that are provided. Even Ellen G. White states it clearly. When it is required to take the medication, do so. Medication is about weighing the risks against the benefits. There's absolutely nothing in the scriptures that say that we mustn't use medication. So let us caution against that, right? How long you take the medication, it depends on the severity of the illness, right? For some, we've got depressive disorders, we've got psychotic disorders, we've got different kinds of disorders, and all those require different kinds of treatment, which are for a certain period of time for that illness. So others can be 6 months, and you are okay, the symptoms are okay, and when you are evaluated, maybe tried out of treatment for a period of time, right? And others can be lifelong. Literally, as I was saying, if you've got diabetes, you are dependent on insulin. For mental health problems, you can also be dependent on the treatment for your sanity, right? So do ask the doctor, how long am I going to take this treatment for? If you want a trial of the medication, and if your symptoms can be tried out of medication, of course the doctor will say, let's try you for a period of time without medication and see how you're going to cope, depending on what your illness is and how your symptoms are. So it's very important to negotiate that with your doctor. But I do want to say it again, never use God not to take the medication, right? Never say God is against medication. There is absolutely no such. You will disadvantage you so much when you do so. God is not at all against medication, only when it's detrimental to your health. Let's take the last hand.
Okay, thank you very much, ma'am. The information has been quite helpful for me personally. However, there are points that I do differ. And I believe that in me speaking, you might be able to reconcile those with me. Life as we know it is not only as natural as we see it. There is a spiritual realm behind everything that happens as we know it to happen. And so from scripture, John chapter 5, do believe that, John chapter 5 verse 40, do believe that there are, or rather there is disobedience being a cause of some of the things that we go through. There is, as you mentioned, the fall of men or sin being a result of, or rather, making people ill, as well as what you mentioned, which I differ on, a lack of faith. And this is taken from Matthew chapter 12, where Christ then says that there are demons within a house or hosted by a person's body. And these demons are sent away or they are cast out. And as they are cast out, that house has been swept, has been garnished. But now the demon, as it has wandered into the desert, it goes back to its house and finds that there is nothing in the house. Or interpreted, there is no faith, or what we understand to be the faith, a compendium of our beliefs, or the consciousness of Christ crucified and the reality of his resurrected power in our mortal vessels. So with a lack of that, I believe it's possible that certain things can come to us, certain illnesses, which as we mentioned before, have demons sustaining them. So you could talk about cancer, for example. Cancer is a demon behind it. You could talk about mental illness, for example. Mental illness is a demon behind it. Right? There is what we, I believe, discussed, which are the physical remedies to these things, which work and complement spiritual remedies. Over and above, John says, I wish that as you prosper in your health, you will also prosper in your soul. Which means that as you advance in your spiritual, path of spiritual progress, you also are healthy and a person of good health.
Thank you so much, my brother. I fully agree with you in terms of the spiritual. I mean, if you look at the etiologic factors I mentioned, I said biopsychosocial, spiritual, right? So we never dispute the fact that the devil is behind. I mean, we've got people who do present with psychosis, right, who are really demon possessed. What is most important is before you draw conclusions from the symptoms that you see, get yourself thoroughly assessed.
Amen.
Don't just sit back and decide that I'm demon possessed, right? We know, and the symptoms can overlap. I mean, the spiritualism and all those things, right? But don't put yourself at risk by just sitting back and say, it's a demon, I'm gonna pray about it. Get yourself thoroughly assessed, comprehensively assessed, to get to the bottom of exactly what is it that you are presenting with, so that the intervention that you receive will be tailored, even if it's a spiritual cause. The spiritual intervention will definitely be tailored for that, right? So we're definitely not disputing, and I didn't dispute it on the etiology, but it's very important for us not to think you're gonna sit back and say everything is demon possessed. Every devil is the source of all this, right? But we are here, right? So it still doesn't mean fold your arms and say, it's the devil, I'm not gonna take the medication, I'm not gonna pray about it. You're putting yourself at high risk. Pray and use the intervention that is required. For some, it may just be the demons, just like when Jesus was here, right? And he prayed and the demons were gone and the person was fine. If it is that kind of a presentation, it's good. Then that's the intervention, right? And when you take the medication, it doesn't mean you don't believe in God or your faith is less. Not at all. Otherwise, you might as well not take insulin and say you're going to pray about it. Right? When you are sick, don't go and take flu tablets. Say you're going to pray about everything else. Don't choose mental illness. Right? So it's everything. Get yourself assessed so that you get the intervention that is tailored to that problem. And God is not against the use of pharmacological interventions. Thank you so much.